Morning, Jonty. Morning,
Hey,
everybody.
Carl. Good to
Thanks
see
for
you. Good to see you.
joining us. Today is going to be an interesting day. We've got Jonty Sacks from Jaltech, but just before Jonty joins us, I had a meeting yesterday with one of the bigger financial institutions, and what struck me as being interesting was the projects they're involved with. So the financial institutions, one of the bigger five more corporate institutions, they were talking about the projects, and they were talking about water purifying projects. They were talking about health. They were talking about all sorts of things that we would think or consider would be outside of the solar sector. And I thought what was actually relevant to this discussion we're having with Jonty today is how financing can broaden the scope of what you guys are busy with. So instead of just focusing on solar per se, so Jonty is going to tell us about their financing models. Jonty, coincidentally, I saw an email of yours in my inbox this morning dating back to 2017. And you had a discussion in your email about 12, was it 12L?
J. 12J.
12J. You had a
Yes.
discussion in your email about the tax incentives. So
Mhm.
it was very nice to see because it's been a very long time, and your knowledge base, your experience, and the stuff that you've seen in industry is going to be amazing in your presentation. So I've got quite a couple of questions lined up for you,
Right.
but I don't want to take away from your presentation. I'm excited about what you're going to be sharing with us. And yeah, I hope the guys that are joining us today is prepared. I've got a couple of notebooks lying around, and you guys are going to be making lots of notes. I'm seeing financing as a mechanism to broaden the offerings that you can give your clients, and hopefully, yeah, there's a lot of finance jobs lying and waiting out there.
Mhm.
Jonty, you are welcome to continue with your presentation.
Perfect.
We have one of your colleagues joining us today as well, but he's not going to be presenting. I don't know
No,
whether
it's,
you.
it's just me. You can
Okay,
limit it to me. That's perfect. Great.
excellent.
Cool.
Jonty, you go.
Cool. Thanks very much. And everyone, I'm blown away at the attendance. So, the AREP Association clearly has got a strong contingency of industry players. So, thank you everyone for joining. As Carl alluded to, my business, which I run along with my business partners, we've been around for many years. And in the solar space, we've had a massive impact. We've already invested more than 2 billion Rand into commercial solar. So, myself and my team, some of which are on the call, we meet with EPCs, developers, industry players every single day. So, over the years, I have developed a lot of knowledge and experience, and I've put together a presentation which is dealing with finance, funding solar projects. And I think for EPCs or developers who or solar installers, if you prefer the term, who don't offer funding, I think you're making a big mistake. I think you need to identify funding partners that you think you can work with, that can execute on projects, because I think it'll really open the industry to you. I think we all have seen what's happening in the industry at the moment. It is a bit suppressed. We are seeing deals close. We're not seeing as many deals come through the door, but the closure rate is higher, which is positive. So, in order to generate more business, you need to tool yourself or your business with options. Cole, if you can't see this, just let me know. But I assume everyone can see
Yes,
the screen.
yes,
Great.
we could. We
So, if you don't have a pen and paper, as Carl said, you should have. It's okay. I assume this is being recorded, and the recording will be made available. These slides will be made available. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat in the chat section, and we'll address them. And if you're too shy to ask a question or the question comes to you later, my details will be made available, and reach out, and we'll see if we can assist. So this is really, I've tooled these slides to be really a guide for EPCs around funding in the market. And the question really is, why is funding needed? Well, what we've seen is that there's a funding gap. We do see clients wanting funding for R1 million or R2 million, but it's a small segment of the market. The real segment of the market is R3 to R8 million, particularly around the R5 million. That's the sweet spot where customers simply don't want to spend the money. They've got other ambitions for that capital, whether it be working capital, whether it be paying a huge dividend, but they haven't really earmarked it or budgeted for capital expenditure in solar for around R3 to R8 million. So there's this funding gap. And really what customers want is they just want cheap electricity. So if there's a funding mechanism that achieves that without having them to spend all their capital on solar, that's their preference. And that's what we're seeing in the market. So really the EPC's role in the funding conversation, it's a very important one. One is for your business, it widens the market. Customers can't always just pay cash. And probably what you've seen is you send out a lot of quotes, follow up with the customer, they don't get back to you. Because most businesses or people aren't going to say, sorry guys, I just don't have 2 million or 3 million lying around for solar. Rather just pay, the extra 10, 15 grand to Eskom. I just don't have the cash. So it widens your market. It gives you more tools in your arsenal to be able to offer to customers. It also allows customers to consider a larger system. So I'm not saying you should oversell, install a megawatt where they only need 500 kilowatts. Is sometimes customers need a larger system, and if they don't have that larger system, then they're not going to get the benefit of solar. And a great example was a presentation we gave yesterday to a very prominent golf course where they needed batteries. They need to spend 340,000 Rand a year on a battery component that'll give them 4 hours of usage, where the entire golf course can run on batteries, but it comes at a cost. And as a result, it reduces their savings from the system. But if they don't have it, the cost that they're going to spend on generators in times of power interruptions is much, much higher. So by funding their solution, we can give them a bigger system and potentially a bigger saving. By having various funding options, your closure rate will automatically go higher. By only offering cash, it's not good enough. You need to be able to offer more. And that brings me to my last point. It levels your business up. It presents your business in a position where you're more than just a company that can design, install, commission, and maintain. I think it elevates your company. So there are 4 ways of funding solar, and I'm going to go through the 4 ways. The first few or all might be very obvious to you, but I then go into what questions need to be asked in order to narrow down what would work for a customer. Because a PPA works for a few customers, a rental, only a few. So you need to be able to understand the client's needs before offering them a rental, PPA, cash, or finance. So I'm going to go through these because some of the points will be new to you. So the first option is cash. Okay, it's cheaper. So when you buy with cash, there's no financing charges, there's no interest. It's going to be cheaper for the customer. So if the customer's got cash and they're cash rich, even though my business funds solar, I would say to the customer, go cash. It's definitely a better solution, and there's a Section 12B tax benefit for the customer. There are cons. 500, 6 million Rand, gone out of your business. They could have used it somewhere else. So there's an opportunity cost lost. And when they pay cash, there's a performance and risk of the system. There's technology risk, which the customer is going to take. It's their system. Yes, there's an EPC backing it. There's warranties backing it. But people go out of business. People immigrate. The customer ultimately is going to carry that risk. Cash is ideal, as I mentioned, for businesses that have cash. They want to own the system and they can take advantage of the tax benefit. It might be, we could argue that if someone has cash, but their business isn't going to enjoy the 12B benefit, the tax benefit, cash might not be the right option for them. The second is your typical financing option. You go to a bank, you ask for a loan. They're pros. The customer retains ownership of the system. They own it, even though the bank finances it. They get the tax benefit. It's a shorter commitment. Banks typically only offer 5 to 7 year terms, which has a negative. And customers understand it. They have a relationship with their bank. Their banks give them overdrafts for all kinds of working capital facilities, for bonds, etc. They have that relationship. They go knock on their banker's door. But their cons, many customers don't have good credit. They have an Eskom bill that they're paying every single month for the last 20 years. They've never missed non-paying Eskom, but they don't have the best credit. Or they need to put down 10 to 30%. They might not have the deposit needed for a 10 million rand system. They don't have 3 million rand lying around. But putting on debt finance weighs the balance sheet of a business down. Unavoidable. Customer takes on the risk that the system, again, similar to buying it outright, the system risk, the performance risk. And then the biggest con or downside is it takes 2 to 4 months. And that is not, that's, on a good deal. And the problem for yourselves is 2 to 4 months is a long time. Other competitors come in offering customers different deals, PPA deals, rental deals, and invariably you could lose the opportunity. So 2 to 4 months is a long time to wait. So finance is really ideal for corporates with strong credit, low gearing, so they don't have a lot of debt already in their business, and they've got sufficient taxable income to enjoy the Section 12B tax benefit. If I am going too quick and you do have questions, put them in the chat section. I'll answer them. And as I mentioned earlier, my email address will be available and you can ask me questions privately if you prefer. So the second last is a rental option. Customer enters into a fixed term, fixed payment for the system. The pros are it's fixed, predictable cost. Customer knows this is my first year rental, goes up every year, by X rate. The rental payments is deductible. It's an expense. It's off balance sheet. Customers not impairing their balance sheet. Much faster approval than a bank. Typically dealing with a company that does this day in and day out. So it's quick, and there's no upfront capex cost. So there's no upfront cost at all. The cons: the customer doesn't own the system during the term. This might not be a con for some customers. Typically higher cost than cash off bank finance. Rentals are always higher. There's also upfront costs. And again, they're renting the system, effectively theirs, and they're taking performance and technology risk. And this is your typical for your SME or mid-market businesses. Customers valuing cost predictability. Customers don't want to use bank finance or impair their balance sheet. And this is really good for a company who wants a short term. So they're a tenant, they've got 5 years left on their lease, they enter into a 5 year solar system rental. It works perfectly for them. So this works for many businesses, but not for all. And then the PPA funded option, entering into a power purchase agreement or a energy supply agreement. The pros: fixed, predictable cost. The big selling factor is that it's tariff based. The customer knows that when they consume electricity, they're paying 2 Rand, and this is typically lower than what Eskom currently charges. And the increase rate, the escalation rate of a PPA is almost always lower than Eskom. For obvious reasons, if it was higher, then the customer wouldn't go with the PPA. And PPAs, I can assure you, are very popular. Last year, we funded more than R1 billion worth of PPAs. So PPAs are very popular. The performance risk sits on the funder. So in a PPA, the funder finances it. So they're responsible to make sure that the EPC partner designs, installs, commissions, operates, maintains. If the system is down, it's the PPA funder's problem. And the PPA fund is incentivized to make sure the system is working optimally because they're going to lose revenue. Where on a rental, if the system is down, the rental company still gets their rent. It's the customer who is going to get frustrated and not benefit because the system is down. A PPA is off balance sheet. There are cons. The lock-in period is 10 to 20 years. And believe it or not, although it's a con or negative, the longer the PPA, the cheaper it is. So if I look at the tariff that we offered a golf course yesterday, over 10 years, it was 2.50 Rand. They're paying 5 Rand, believe it or not. They are not on a time of use tariff. They're paying 5 Rand, whether they use it in the morning or in the middle of the day. But over 15 years, that tariff went down to, I think, 190, which is really attractive to the customer. Another downside is you're reliant on a third party. You're reliant on a funder and his EPC partner to make sure that the system is operating, which again, the PPA funder is incentivized to make sure that it is operating. So this is ideal for customers who don't want to take solar risk. They just want cheap electricity. They don't care how. They just care that when the sun is shining, they're buying cheap electricity. They don't want to impair their balance sheet. They want off-balance sheet funding. Customers who are willing to enter long terms. So this wouldn't work for a tenant who's in for 5 years. This would work for a property owner, a farmer, or a tenant who's in for a long term, which is not too common. So you can, with a PPA funder, do an arrangement with the property owner. And this is suitable for customers who aren't too interested in the Section 12B tax benefit. So if we look at it side by side, the different options, I'm not going to go through every single line. These slides will be made available, and so will the recording be. But if we look at the first line, so cash, you need 100% upfront. Finance, you need 10 to 30% as a deposit or equity. Rental, you don't need any capital, and a PPA, you don't need any capital. So again, if the customer is sitting a lot of cash, clearly they'd go the cash route. If we look at performance risk, which is the final line, on cash, on finance, on rental, the customer's taking that risk. I know there's an EPC involved or a solar installer that's responsible, but ultimately, if they immigrate or their business goes down, the customer's at risk. In a PPA, it's the funder's responsibility. So now, when you're sitting with a customer and you have a relationship with us, and maybe you have a relationship with a bank or the customer has a relationship with a bank, it's important for the EPC to be able to know and ask the right questions before proposing a PPA, as an example. So let's say it was a person who's a tenant, and they got 3 years left of their lease. A PPA would not make sense for that customer. You'd say, oh, let's consider a rental option, and I can introduce you to company PTY Limited. So, first question I think is, what is your appetite for upfront capex? Do you have cash? Is the business cash rich? Have you budgeted for this? And if the customer says, no, 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 we just spent a huge amount of money buying another farm. Okay, well, then cash is not an option. Financing might not be an option. Do you own the property? If they say no, well, how long is your lease? If your lease is very short, not an option. If it's very long, well, rental's an option. PPA is an option. Financing, I don't think it's an option because they're going to own the system on someone else's property. Not ideal. Is ownership important to you? Or do you just want the energy saving? Some customers, ownership is important. Rental options, PPA options, the customers become the owner typically at the end of the term. So they can get that through a PPA, but if they just want an energy saving, maybe a PPA is a better option. Can you utilize the Section 12B tax benefit? Hey, how was business last year? Did you have a great year? Are you paying a lot of tax this year? Maybe not. And maybe the Section 12B benefit is just not for them. How long will you be operating on the site? Yes, the farmer, you own the site, you've got this pack house, but are you looking at a new pack house? Are you looking to move your operations? If you are, maybe we should put solar on hold for now until you've moved. And then what's your credit profile like? Is the business looking good? What is the future of the business hold? If you're a startup, uh, most of these options probably won't even work. Ultimately, if you're not credit worthy, you're not going to get finance, you're not going to get a rental, and you're not going to get a PPA, and you don't have the cash. So, as an EPC, don't waste your time any further with this customer, unfortunately. So there are also benefits for an EPC looking at a PPA. So I'll speak on a Jaltech behalf. So by entering into by offering one of our PPA funded solutions, the EPC will earn revenue from the O&M for the next 10 to 20 years. We're not an O&M provider. The EPC, and I'll explain this shortly, will enjoy recurring income from the PPA. Not only a once-off income from procurement, installation. There's additional annuity. And I think you've seen in the market, a lot of EPCs would be under less pressure if they had some annuity income from historic sites, which is still an option. And I'll explain that shortly. By having multiple options, your closure rate, as I mentioned earlier, will increase. You can offer bigger systems to customers if it makes sense for the customer. And most importantly, the funder pays you. So we pay the O&M fee, not the customer. So you're dealing with, we think a reputable business and a healthy business. So what do we offer? Very simply, we offer two solutions. We offer fixed PPA, which is effectively a rental between 5 and 20 years, fixed monthly amount. Customer knows what they're paying, increasing at CPI plus 3, or we can even agree on a fixed rate. So it's effectively a rental, but we call it a fixed PPA, or an output PPA, where for 5 or 20 years, we sell electricity at an agreed tariff, increasing at an agreed rate. And then the performance risk is on Jaltech, not on the customer. So we'll partner with your business, and it'll be your responsibility to the O&M. And then what do we fund? Transactions or systems valued at 1 to 100 million rand. We can go higher if it's a really blue chip customer. We offer terms of 5 to 20 years, so we're very flexible. We can do PV only, or we can do PV and battery, and we only operate in South Africa. We cannot do any deals outside of the country, unfortunately. So why partner with us? Firstly, we don't think anyone else does this. We offer a profit share. So a portion of the effective interest that we charge, we pay away to our EPC partners for as long as the term. So if client's in for 20 years, you'll have an annuity income for 20 years. For us, it's a long-term relationship. As long as the PPA is in place, we'll be in business together for that project. We don't offer O&M services. We're not looking to compete with you. You obtain the procurement margin, the installation margin, those costs, those income, the revenue you would have generated anyway. Had you not gone with us, you'll still get it. We're not trying to squeeze your margin at all. These are your customers, your opportunity. So I'll fly quickly through the next few slides. So if you are interested in doing business with us, it's very simple. We just need a quote you want to send the customer, the helioscope. We then put a proposal together, typically the same day. So if I got a proposal at 10 a.m., by 1 o'clock, you'll have a funded PPA funded proposal from us. You then send that to the customer. If the customer likes what he sees or she sees, and you will or we can request simple credit information from the customer. That then goes to our investment committee. If they're comfortable, this gets approved. We've got 2 full-time lawyers in our business. They'll send agreements to you or to the customer. We'll walk the customer through the agreements. And then when we're done, the procurement, installation, monitoring will take place. For us, this is typically a quick process. We are largely focused at solar in our company. So we've got multiple engineers in our business. We've got project engineers who go to site. We've got a large deal-making or transaction team who can process deals very quickly. And what we've seen is deals under 5 million rand takes 7 to 14 days from start to finish. Above 5 million takes 2 to 4 weeks. But there are elements which slow us down, and largely because of the customer. Maybe incomplete information, the customer's accounts aren't up to date, they don't have their latest balance sheet. There's changes post-approval. Maybe there's an issue with the roof and remedial work. We've all been there. We've all seen it. Remedial work has to take place. Or delays in legal sign-off. Customers aren't too familiar with legal jargon and they need more guidance. And we get involved and we help through that process. So why partner with us? We've done over 2 billion rand since 23. Last year we did 1 billion. Done over 250 sites across the country. More than 80 megawatts of PV and BESS installed. We're quick. We're flexible. We put the EPC first. We understand your business and we incentivize our EPCs because if we are profitable, we want our EPC to be profitable. And just to show you that we do business all around the country, 44% of our portfolio is in the Western Cape, 31% in Gauteng, KZN, Mpumalanga, etc. And we're also sector agnostic. So if you've got We've done over 60 schools, many farms. Baie van die mense wat met ons werk praat Afrikaans. My Afrikaans is pretty good. So, we think we can communicate with most off-takers. And again, any sector of the market, we're pretty comfortable to work with. Great. Well, Carl, I hope that was short and sweet enough for everyone to really take in what the options are in the market and really how we operate as a business.
Jonty, that was excellent. Thank you very much. I see I'm not hesitant to do it, but
Okay.
I see Johan has his hand up. Um, so I'm going to allow Johan to talk. I'm assuming Johan has a question, unless he just put his hand up to say, how's it? So active I have activated Johan's microphone. Johan, I might have just muted you again. While we are waiting for Johan to sort out his microphone, I have a couple of questions. So one maybe from a statistical point of view, your one of your last slides showed the spread across the different provinces. Now I know the Western Cape, it takes us much longer to kind of negotiate with the guys. It's almost like it takes them longer to make a board decision. Is that your experience as well from a financing point of view, or is your time to closure for the different provinces more or less the same regardless of the province?
Carl, I'll answer, but there's a bit of background noise from Johan, so I'm not sure if he is aware that he's off mute and would like to ask his question.
Johan?
I think maybe it was an error with the hand signal.
Yeah, so at the moment, Johan, are you there? Johan? Yeah, okay, so I'm going to, Johan? Sorry?
No, I just pressed the wrong one. That's the problem.
Okay, that's
something I pressed wrong on the laptop. Yeah, sorry.
Thank
No worries.
you.
You can just mute.
No problem.
Okay.
Okay,
Carl,
cool.
it's an interesting question. No, I don't think that there's been any delays or there's, for some reason geographically the decision-making process is longer or shorter. We haven't typically experienced that. The only sector of the market where we've experienced delays, and I think everyone on the call has probably experienced it, is with body corporates and estates. So body corporates and estates, you need a collective decision from people who aren't maybe financially inclined, energy inclined. So we find body corporates very tiresome to deal with. We've done a lot, but it's a sector of the market which is quite frustrating to close. So
Okay.
to answer your question, Western Cape, no particular.
Okay, that's excellent. I see Vilma says, does this have an effect on the client's credit score? So I kind of had the same question. My question was just phrased slightly differently. It's like, what about a bad credit record? How do you guys deal with bad credit records versus banks? And I don't know if that's what Vilma's asking. Otherwise, Vilma can maybe just clarify with a bit more detail.
Yeah, so I can answer it on multiple levels. A company's credit score is only considered where there's finance or PPA is needed, sometimes in a rental. So credit score is important. If they had to default on us or on finance or even on rental, it would affect their credit score. Companies with bad credit, it's difficult. It's difficult to get them approved. There are sectors in the market where we are more lenient. Those are schools, as an example. Schools use electricity during the day, so it's easier for us to know that they will consume the electricity. Another option is body corporates. Although they are difficult to close, body corporates have the ability to call for a special levy if there's a default. So we're a bit more lenient on body corporates. But credit is ultimately this is a credit opportunity. So if your business has poor credit, doesn't have profits, you're going to struggle with us or with anyone else in the market. But there's no downside in just reaching out and seeing if we can make a plan. But credit is very important.
Okay, and then Wilma has another question. Do you guys pay the customer directly, or how does what's the payment flow, or how does that side work?
Yeah, so we can do whatever. So if the EPC wants us to pay the customer, we could. But normally, how we work is we'll sit down with the EPC and see, okay, great, it's a 10 million rand build or 3 million rand build. What's your cash flow requirements for the system? Now, we would not pay 100, we would not pay 100% upfront. We'd want to agree on milestones. So whether it be 40% or 50% or whatever the number is, we paid in milestones. So once X is done, we release the next milestone. But we sit down, we discuss it, and it needs to make sense for everyone. We wouldn't, or no funder would pay 100% upfront because, um, there's risks involved with that.
And how do we deal with costing? So I'm an EPC. I bring a project to you guys that the client wants to have funded, but maybe my cost per kilowatt or cost per watt peak for the installation is slightly higher than what you guys are used to, because surely you would know the benchmarks in industry, but maybe I perceive my risks as a contractor. Maybe it's a tricky roof. I have to compensate a little bit for adding a bit of meat to the bone, if I can call it that. What happens when the costing an EPC provides you guys with is a bit above what you would consider to be the market average?
So, Carl, last year we priced 7.9 billion rand. Okay. So EPCs brought us deals of 7.9 billion rand. This went through our machine and we prepare proposals and we review every single bill of quantities or quote. And where the price is just completely out of whack, we sit down with the EPC to understand. So to your point, maybe, if we look at the price per kilowatt, there is transmission cables needed. Okay, great. That makes complete sense. And we're happy to fund it. But where an EPC is maybe getting not great pricing. So some people aren't going to be happy with what I'm going to say, but there are some EPCs who get very favorable pricing because they only go to one supplier and they're platinum and they get 30% discount relative to everyone else. Everyone else who comes to us, their pricing might be much higher because they're not getting a great deal. So we would sit down with the supplier and say, listen, we're very happy for you to make a margin. Okay. We can get the same equipment at this cost base. Is it better? And if it's better, yeah, I'll introduce you to the supplier. It'll go through Jaltech, the Jaltech code. We don't make any money. There's no rebates. There's no commission for us. We just want cheaper system. And then the EPC can go and form their own relationship with that supplier and get a better rate. On the extreme, which happens very rarely, where an EPC will quote us with a 50-70% margin, we wouldn't fund it because what will happen is the customer maybe might agree to it, but the customer's getting a terrible deal. And after a year or so, they're going to realize, by speaking to their friends, that they're paying 10 Rand a kilowatt versus 3 Rand, and they're not going to want to pay us. And then we're going to have to remove the system. And what are we getting? We're getting a system which is worthless because we've overpaid by 70%. The real cost is half. And now the real value is half of that because it's second-hand equipment. So, we're not idiots. We've been doing a lot of this. We don't want to be taken advantage of. We want the EPC to make a good margin so that they can remain in business. And there's an industry norm. So we know how to deal with this very well.
Okay, so no get rich quick schemes.
No, not for us.
Okay, that's cool. There's a guy that wants to know, how do you guys how do you vet EPCs? What do you look for?
And so we go through we do go through a process, and we've got a questionnaire. And the questionnaire really sets out your experience in the market, how long you've been, what kind of systems do you install, how many systems did you install last year, what's your biggest system, your smallest system. We ask a whole bunch of questions to understand how reputable you are. We might ask to phone a few customers, and then we need to understand how financially sustainable the EPC is. So we don't go and do a huge deep due diligence. We just need to know. Now, if an EPC doesn't meet our requirements, maybe they had a bad year last year and they're in a hole, it doesn't mean we won't do business with them. It just means that we might, instead of paying them 50% upfront, we'll pay 30% to the supplier directly, 20% to them, and we'll build a relationship with them. They'll get their margin and they can operate. We're not going to just kick them to the curb, but we need to also protect our own business. There has been cases where we've given EPCs capital and they've gone insolvent and we've lost money. So, we want people to be in business, but we also want to manage our own investor capital.
I understand. I think that makes sense. So at least if you are not well known in the sector, you have an opportunity to start working with a funder like yourselves and over a period of time build up a reputation. Okay, that makes sense. Tian wants to know, and I almost know the answer to this, but Tian wants to know whether you guys fund municipalities at all.
We haven't done anything with the municipality. If there's an intermediary that does all the collections, it is something we'd look at. So I think Graf Renet, I don't know, change his name. We had a look at, and we almost funded it. So it's not a blanket no, but mostly no.
Yeah, I think municipalities are complicated in the sense that there are very few of them that have a clean accounting record. And just that in itself kind of complicates the matter. So I understand the risk involved in that. So Tiana, I'm considering that question answered. Henri feels that the lack of knowledge or the lack of awareness regarding the full benefits of solar is still relatively unknown. And maybe there we can look at the benefits, kind of looking at the cost per kilowatt hour for solar being substantially lower, or maybe even the tax incentive side. I'm not sure whether that is what Henri is alluding to, but Henri says a significant challenge remains the lack of awareness regarding the full benefits of solar energy.
Well, yeah,
Are we still there?
I think just to comment on that is, I agree. So I think a lot of customers, when we end up sending them a tariff-based proposal, they're surprised. They're like, I can't believe that you can actually supply us electricity cheaper than Eskom. So in areas where there's high tariffs, I think customers need more education, and I think there's a lack of that. So, I kind of echo that point. I see there is another question around, is it legal to charge more than Eskom? Well, the answer is I have no idea, but we would be out of business if that's what we were doing. So,
Oh, Jonty, that's interesting. So when you look at the whole process around NERSA, so municipalities that resell electricity has to have their tariffs approved by NERSA. And I think there is a regulation that says that you're not allowed to charge more, but I don't think for solar financing with where the Eskom tariffs are at the moment, it's definitely below the Eskom. It's definitely below the Eskom tariffs.
yeah, and that's why we're so attractive. No one's going to enter into a PPA where they're paying more than Eskom. Maybe if you look at the PPA, the tariff rate, and you look at the battery as a combined with other costs, maybe it's higher as a combined value, but as a tariff based, we would.
I was
we would
I was just thinking about batteries and especially on some of Eskom's tariffs and maybe even in off-peak periods, you might have the cost for batteries being higher than those off-peak tariffs. But I don't think your cost is going to be higher than what the peak tariffs are.
No, the PV tariff is considerably lower.
Hmm.
When batteries are involved, it, you know, one includes a battery for a specific reason, right? So maybe there is load shedding or load reduction, or maybe there's a genuine opportunity for arbitrage where, using it during peak times makes sense. So a customer's not going to decide to include batteries just SOMA. There's going to be a financial or reason behind it, which will make sense for them.
Yeah. Vilma has clarified a question around the credit score. So Vilma says normal loans at a bank reflect your credit score.
Yes.
Does the PPA option reflect on your credit score like a bank loan? That's an
No, no,
interesting.
it doesn't. It doesn't because it's not a loan. It's not a
Power
loan.
purchase agreements, it's off.
It sits off. It's not on your
Okay.
balance sheet. Yeah.
Vilma, I'm going to consider that one sorted. So Eddie has a slightly more Eddie kind of brings the things home or closer to home. Do you have someone who can explain the funding and how it works to the end user? In other words, I, as an EPC, approach you guys. Do you join me and my customer around a boardroom table and have a discussion?
That is our biggest preference. So I have myself and my team, that's what we do, and we try to do it as much as we can because we are better positioned to answer these questions and to present a PPA to a customer. So we'd be thrilled to. And I think the closure rate would be higher having us there. So that would be our first prize.
Okay, that's pretty cool. James wants to know whether, so we spoke about the vetting and the EPC vetting earlier on. And James kind of alludes to the fact that whether if I, as an EPC, do I need financial backing for you to fund my customer? So James says, what is the need to onboard with you, and what financial assurance do you need from your installers? I think you've already answered the question on how to vet your installers. So, James, you're welcome to have a look at when we post the link to the video. You can go through the video again. I think Jonty has covered how they onboard new guys, but your question around financial assurance of EPC. So do you vet your installers for a bad credit record?
No, I don't want to overblow the credit assessment on EPC. We just want to make sure that the EPC is not going out of business. That if we deposit capital with them for a system, that they're not going to use it to cover their staff costs. So we just have a look and see if the business is profitable. There isn't a requirement that the business must be 100,000 or a 1 million rand profitable. It's just profitable. And it's really it's a quick assessment, so I don't think anyone should be too concerned about it. There's no requirement for an EPC to put in any money in any of our deals. We fund the deal 100%, so that they don't have to put their balance sheet, any cash, any securities, any sureties. We fund the whole system. It's what we do.
The only thing you're scared of is the guy closing his business while you're halfway through a project. So it's really just about assuring, maybe almost more of a cash flow check. Will this guy be able to sustain it, and how is he going to see himself through the project? In all of the projects we've done, we've had to ensure that the cash flow of the project be sustained. Otherwise, we would have not been able to do those projects. So that is, I'm guessing that is what you guys do.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, so James, considering that one sorted, Tian is back again. He says, is there an easy way to get a rate for a client? Yikes. Yeah,
Easy,
especially,
easy, easy.
especially in the
No, no,
initial
no.
feasibility stage
No,
where you just want an estimate. Oh, okay,
no.
okay, okay. Wait, wait,
Yeah.
wait, wait. So, but there are so many variables. I mean, is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Over what period? What are we funding? What's the risk you're taking on? So there are too many
Uh,
variables to really determine a
No, no,
average.
no, no, no. So all we need is the quote that the EPC has submitted or will submit a customer. You know, the cost of the panels, the cost of the batteries, installation, wiring, etc., and the helioscope. Now, if we have that, we'll then say to the EPC, listen, we'll send you a proposal over how many years? 5, 10, 15, 20. So typically we'll go with a 10 or 15 year or both. And we'll then send that to the EPC and they'll get a tariff on the quote, and then they'll send the quote to the customer, and the customer can see what we would fund it at. Now, that's just the starting point. Okay, if the customer likes what they see, and then we go and do a credit check, and we see the customer is high risk, we might increase our rate a bit. But from an indicative funding rate perspective, we can do that in a couple of hours. We do that every single day. Anyone on this call can try us out. Send me a quote with a helioscope, and we'll get it to you today, and you can see what we could offer that customer.
Okay, just helioscope, Open Solar maybe. Open Solar is a free platform. Which other platforms do you approve? And if there are, I saw Brian Hoskins in the meeting. So if there are other platforms, would you consider looking at other platforms? Does it have to be helioscope?
No, we're comfortable with any platform. The only thing we want to see from the helioscope is the system that you've designed, what's the annual output? So we don't even need the design or the helioscope or any system you use. If you just simply email me the quotation and what the system is annually expected to produce, we'll then prepare the funding proposal.
Jonty, we have a few more. Wow, I was thinking, let's just finish these couple of questions quickly, but the questions just keep coming up.
Excellent.
Yeah, so let's quickly run through a few more. I know we are over the time already, but it seems like there are a lot of guys that are getting good value out of the webinar. So I'm excited about that. As long as there's good value and the guys are enjoying the information, that's great. Eddie wants to know, do you also finance additional equipment? So you wanted to know about the lightning protection. Eddie, I think that's obvious, because if it's going to protect the installation, it's going to reduce the risk. But Eddie also included things like variable speed drives and that. So what if there are other types of equipment? So you'd have your solar system, and instead of just the solar and the inverters, you have a couple of additional pieces of equipment that is going to reduce the customer's energy consumption. So almost like an energy efficiency linked to solar system.
So where there's a direct link, so for example, transmission cables, lightning protection, maybe there's a small repair needed on a roof, we would fund it, and it would be part of our funding solution. Typically, we don't like that to be a large component of the entire system, so maybe 5 or 10 or 15% of the total cost. And without this cost, the system wouldn't be viable. We would absolutely fund it. But we're happy to have a look and just debate it on a case-by-case basis. We want the project to go ahead just as the customer and the EPC. So we would try and make it happen.
Okay, that kind of explains it. So if I've got an agri installation with a pivot irrigation system, then the variable speed drive forms a part of the entire installation. So you'll have the solar, you'll have the variable speed drive, you'll have the pump. That'll form part of the installation, and obviously the lightning protection will form part of that as well. That would be one part of it. But where you've got a factory and you've got an energy efficiency upgrade split to the solar system installation, that would have to be considered separately.
Yeah, exactly. I think a great example, which I think most people on the call will resonate with, is if you look at a farmer who's got a big farm or multiple farms adjacent to each other, they got all these transmission box transformers, and there might be we're looking at a farmer now in Nelspruit, he's got 12, and the fixed cost for each one it's eye watering. So what we are planning on doing is reducing the amount and then running cables to the various points. And that cable cost is a cost that we'll carry because without it, the system won't perform optimally. And the farmer is going to have a massively reduced fixed cost component because he'll have less transformers. So again, each project has its own challenges, and we, very flexible around trying to solve for them.
Okay, and then Craig says, I wanted to confirm that you offer rental as well as PPA funding, and if so, yes, I was tempted. I was going to ask you this, but before the time, I had to talk myself off the ledge. So
No,
Craig is
you can
asking
ask
the
it. You can
question:
ask it.
what is the ballpark no. What is the typical interest rate being applied to rentals?
Perfect. So it all depends on risk. So for deals 1 million to 5 million rand, we charge a higher interest rate, anywhere in the region of 15%. And why it's higher is because these are typically smaller businesses with a smaller balance sheet and high risk for us. So that's where the market's at. In fact, the market is between 15 and 18% for deals under 5 million. For deals over 5 million, we charge typically around 13 and a bit percent. Now, I'm not sure if some people are thinking, whoa, that's very high, but don't forget about the risk. So the risk here is we're installing a system. This system is producing electricity and we're selling that electricity. If it doesn't produce, we've got no revenue. So yes, we might be charging prime plus two, but there will be times where we've got no revenue because the system is down, because lightning struck the system, because it's been raining for 2 weeks. So there's material risk on us. And what I can tell you is our rates are, I think, the best in the market. And our track record speaks for itself. Last year we had a really good year, so we're very competitive, and I think the customers get a good deal.
Okay. Craig also says he has like a double barrel question in one attempt. What is the ballpark recurring income for an EPC one could expect from a PPA agreement?
So the obvious one is the annual maintenance and monitoring fee, and we see typically 1.5 to 2.5%, and that's earned for the next 20 years, and then we pay away a portion of our interest rate, and prefer not to announce it on a webinar. So if someone is interested, we can sit down. I can share with you a model of how your participation works. You'll see it in black and white, and you'll see what you'll earn over the next 20 years, and it's attractive.
Wow. Jonty, no end to the questions. We are
Mm.
up to 17 questions. Guys, I'm going to have to end the meeting at 1 o'clock, unfortunately, but let's cover a few more questions while we've still got time. So Rulof says, could you share the industry norm on margins? I'm not sure whether Rulof, you might have to clarify that.
Procurement margin. I think that's 20 to 30%, maybe a little bit higher in that region. And again, we're happy to discuss it and make it work for everyone. I don't want someone to think, oh my gosh, Jaltech's going to make us only have a 10% margin. That's not the case. We understand the margin in this space, so happy to deal with it, as and when necessary.
And we've got one guy, somewhere in the presentation, you mentioned 10 Rand per kilowatt hour. And then the question over here is it legal to charge a higher rate? I think that has been answered. If you have what's so interesting, if you look at a generator purchase, the customer is buying the generator at a 1 million rand, for example, but his actual cost for operating that generator might be 15 Rand per kilowatt hour. No one says this is a legal or an illegal purchase. When you guys fund batteries, you fund the battery and you disclose the cost in rate per kilowatt hour. So
we don't typically charge a per kilowatt hour rate for batteries, because batteries don't produce electricity, they store electricity. So us and the rest of the market, we typically do it as a rental. So a customer will pay us a solar PV rate for what is produced by the system, and we'll charge a monthly rate for the battery. Now, if we combine the two, because you can see that the battery is going to produce for 4 hours at X, that'll then give us a blended tariff, which we'll disclose to the customer. We'll say, listen, on this deal, your effective tariff is 4 Rand, 4 Rand 50, or whatever the number is on this golf course that I was at yesterday. It was like 4 Rand 20, a blended rate, still cheaper than what they're paying. It might be higher than what other people are paying, but we're not charging a tariff rate for the batteries. It's a rental. So it's not a way of trying to get around of legislation. It's just batteries don't produce electricity, they store it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Ian says, do you guys fund generators and over what period? Is there any O&M in this?
No, we don't do generators, unfortunately.
So,
Anything solar related, we'll do.
Kalen says, does Jaltech require PCGs from the EPC?
What's it? I don't know what a PCG is.
I'm a little stumped myself. If yes, what proposition do you offer for an EPC whose balance sheet can't hold the PCG on their balance sheet, similar to how the client can't hold? Okay, so this is really just assessing the risk of the install.
I think that could be some form of like performance guarantee, um, performance construction guarantee, maybe PCG.
Yes.
So again, if the EPC is not in a position to take one out, or for whatever reason they don't qualify with us because they are not profitable, or they have got cash flow issues, we'll enter into an arrangement where we'll pay the supplier directly. So let's say, for instance, your margin is 20%, and the system, you're charging the customer 1.2 million. We'll pay you your 200,000 Rand, your procurement margin, we'll pay it to you, and the million Rand will pay directly to the supplier. That way, we don't have exposure of 1.2 million Rand with a company which, we can't guarantee to our investors that they'll be around for the next 6 months, to build. Ultimately, the message to you should be: we want to do business with as many companies as we can, and we'll find a way that it works. And if we can't, we'll be transparent and not waste your time.
Jonty, this has been amazing. The questions just keep coming, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to end this session. We've got enough questions, I think, for at least another half an hour.
Carl, maybe if I could just direct everyone's attention to the webinar chat section. My email address is there. For those of you who want to ask your questions, just pop me an email during the course of today, tomorrow. I'll get to them, and maybe we can set up some time and take discussions forward.
That is excellent. Thank you very much, guys. I think this has been an amazing webinar. Jonty, thank you very much for your relaxing style. I've enjoyed how you've done the presentation. It wasn't very it
overcomplicated.
No, and it was a nice casual chat. Your answers are straightforward, easy to understand, and yeah, I think they've given a lot of the guys a lot of information. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us, and thanks, Jaltech, for using AREP for this webinar.
Thank you very much, Carl. All the best.
Thanks, guys.
Yes.
Keep well. Bye.